Welcome to the Friends of Delray, a diverse group of Delray Beach residents coming together to build a positive city environment which is open and transparent. Our goal is to inform, share, and unite. Learn about what's happening in our village by the sea, from our pristine beaches to the corridors of City Hall. Hi, I'm Judy Malika, moderator for the Friends of Delray podcast, and a concerned Delray citizen willing to ask the tough questions of our informed guests and dig deep into the issues relevant to the future of our wonderful city. Today we're going to discuss Old School Square Center for the Arts. On August 10th, 2021, the Delray Beach City Commission voted to terminate the city's lease of Old School Square property with OSS Center for the Arts. This was a non-agenda item and had no public input before it was brought up last year at the August Commission meeting. Commissioner Julie Casal, Mayor Shelley Petrolia, and Commissioner Shirley Johnson voted to terminate the lease without cause. Even after a petition with over 11,000 signatures was presented, they did not bring it back up for a vote the following meeting. We're here to discuss what is Old School Square Center for the Arts, how it got started, and I'm hoping to bring clarity about some of the rumors that are being repeated from the dais, as well as in correspondence to citizens from the city commissioners. I have some very informed guests to help answer some questions. I'm delighted to welcome our guests. I welcome Joe Gilley. Joe has worked in the arts in Palm Beach County for 37 years. Joe was the president CEO of Old School Square for 23 years. He's chaired several cultural committees through Palm Beach County, received the Lifetime Achievement Award for Leadership and Artistic Excellence from the National Society of Arts and Letters. Thanks for being with us, Joe. I also welcome Michael Weiner. Michael Weiner is an attorney who specializes in, among other things, real estate land development law and is an expert in readaptive use and redevelopment of blighted areas. Michael owns one of the oldest homes in Delray Beach. He graduated from University of Michigan Law School and has served on many community boards, including the Achievement Center and Old School Square for the Arts. I welcome you both, Joe and Michael. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
I'm going to start just right out with the questions. Michael, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay.
Sure.
What is Old School Square not-for-profit, and how did it get started?
Well, Old School Square is the heart and soul of Delray Beach. You have to put Old School Square in its context. At the time that Old School Square was being considered for its new role, its prior role was that of an elementary school. It was a very interesting place for an elementary school. Basically, the children would otherwise wander into the streets if it weren't for an 8-foot-high chain link fence and then the addition of barbed wire at the top of that fence in order to make it safe. It was the intersection.
Oh, okay.
In order to make it safe and secure. That's the way that particular school existed for decades in our downtown. And then, of course, it was operated by the school system. We completely understood there was a budget, but it was spray painted beige, had some outdated air conditioning equipment that ran up the side of the buildings, and quite honestly, was about as unattractive as you could make the center of a downtown. So the citizens, those citizens who were concerned about the future of Delray, realized that it had to be put to some type of new use.
Wait, was it still an operating school at the time?
It was still an operating school. It would operate as a school until the last day when it was finally turned over to Old School Square. And the children were picked up and the buses were there. But as I say, given the chain link fence, the barbed wire, the approach to the maintenance, it couldn't have been farther from what you wanted a gathering place to be. No one would want to gather there after dark.
What did the rest of the avenue look like at that point?
Well, at that point, if you basically put the weeds in the middle of downtown, you couldn't have the rose bushes growing around it. And so there were other things that had occurred, the opening of the Boca Raton Mall, I-95, that had already vacuumed out most of the business activity from downtown Delray. Now, I know no one wants to believe that.
I think it was 70% of the buildings were sitting unoccupied by the mid-1980s. So there were only 30% of the buildings that were occupied in downtown Delray. And plus, you can imagine what happened. That was a death sentence. When the school moved out, it left those 3 buildings just sitting there, absolutely sitting just totally abandoned in the middle of downtown, along with 70% of the other buildings. Yeah. So,
yeah.
But that's the way it sort of panned out.
And Joe sets the scene absolutely correctly. So at that point, no one was wandering into Delray. There was a very difficult situation for any of the remaining businesses. You had to walk past things that were dark and unfriendly. There was nothing that resembled the Pineapple Grove that you see now. Mm-hmm. The shopping centers were stressed. A few things remained, a toy store, a small grocery, some things of that sort. But everything that you see in the year 2022, it wasn't there at that time. So, moving the story forward, there were remaining citizens that realized that the life had been sucked out of downtown, that we really were on life support, that there wasn't anything that resembled vibrancy associated with Delray Beach. The Palm Trail was dark and considered unsafe. Homes were dilapidated because no one wanted to move in them, which everyone in the year 2022 seems to think is impossible. Right. No, there were deserted streets.
Wow.
Finally, a group of citizens came along and said, we are going to find a way to do something else. And that something else was an arts and cultural center. And it wasn't, don't forget, this is almost 35 years ago now. Mm-hmm. Am I right on that?
Yeah, pretty much.
So 35 years ago, that kind of approach to saving a city wasn't on the tongue of
there was no roadmap
right.
for that.
That wasn't what was standard and customary. In fact, so what we're talking about is what is forgotten about the rise of Old School Square. So one of the things that is forgotten is it paved a path. It was a chance. It was something that everybody took a risk. And then they began to form the basics that were necessary to fund it, to find the volunteers, to staff it, and to come up with the creative ideas that would occupy that place. It was important, of course, that there be a substantial amount of money. And Frances Bork, her husband, a number of other very successful people raised the seed money. They were able to have enough gumption to be able to go to the state and get one of the last grants that the state could afford. And with that, people started to move forward. And that's the defining moment. That's the pebble in the pond. I was a young lawyer in town, and quite honestly, I was thinking, well, where should I have my law offices? And at one point, it was in the Rayborn building, which was down near the where George Bush Boulevard is today. And then I hear about this. I hear about that people are rescuing the school, that the fence is coming down, that I'm not going to live across from razor wire, that they're going to rebuild it in a way because it was a pre-war building in 1923, if I'm right.
1913 was the elementary school, and then 1925 was the high school.
Take a walk by it. You will see things that you won't see on any other public buildings because of the decades in which it was built. So the roof line and the finials and attention to detail could never be duplicated. They were about to be rescued. And instead of a spray-painted beige building with flumes up the side of it, we were going to have something about which we could be proud and which would have a dynamic future because of the volunteers and those people who would give it a presence and a place and give it a reason for being.
That's tremendous. So it was a community that got together. Now you were in revitalization of areas. Did this spark that for you?
When I heard about this, and right now I have a little bit of goosebumps, I got goosebumps that day. And I made it an effort to go across the street and start looking at homes on Swinton.
Is that how you bought
Avenue.
your oldest house?
So the Clark House was there.
Okay.
The Clark House has its own story. Quick synopsis of the Clark House. It was where the Atlantic High School team used to gather because that's where the coach lived. And some of their greatest victories were planned on the front porch. And that's how it got its name, the Clark House, from Coach Clark. And I came on the market. It came on the market just about that time. I bought it for the ungodly price of $31,000.
Wow. Wow.
And
So that's a pretty cool thing. You own a piece of history, then you helped reshape a town. Joe, I had a question for you, and I know you've been involved with Old School Square for 23 years. What built it such that Delray turned vibrant? What were some of the programs offered at Old School Square Center for the Arts? How many people participated in that?
By design, you have to remember that Old School Square is what we call in the business a multidisciplinary site.
Okay.
There is a full running museum, a full running theater, an outdoor stage, and the gymnasium. And to use those and correctly get those up and running, it was like putting a big puzzle together. Initially, when we opened in 1990 with the museum, we had 5 exhibits a year, but we also did exterior stuff and stuff surrounding those types of exhibits. But then you had the theater come on board, and then we get major, activities going on in there. And then you had the gymnasium where we started doing weddings and birthdays and bar mitzvahs and family and very much community-oriented gatherings that would bring the community together. And then we did outside stuff. We didn't get the full pavilion until almost 2001. It was like amazing. People always thought it was there, but it's not. Yeah, we built that. So that's the one building that's not historic is that pavilion on it. So if you look at the beginnings, like around 1990, I would say on an average year, maybe 15,000 people would come to an activity or a cultural event or something that would happen, maybe 15,000 people.
Okay.
Today, put it in perspective, we see over 500,000 people on that site for cultural activities. And that includes everything from, the Delray Affair to the holiday to all the things that happen in downtown at Old School Square. So when you look at it and think of the economic impact that now bringing 500,000 people down to the downtown area, it's really is successful. And I'm happy about that. Very proud of it.
And you've done good work.
Thank you.
Hey, why was the rent only $1 a year from the city?
Well, it was a partnership.
Okay.
And that's what, and then it's not unheard of in a lot of organizations to rent for $1 a year, but the return on the investment, you got to remember that the city, we became partners with the city, and the city took ownership of the buildings once the school board abandoned the buildings. We traded them for some land for school to build another school in the Western community. And so the city became the owners of those buildings. What people don't realize is that Old School Square, we raised over $7 million initially to do the renovations, to do the exterior renovations and interior.
What, from taxpayers or from donors?
No, this is from donors and from
just
grants.
Donations.
From
Okay.
donations and grants.
Okay.
So, but there was some support from the city. For example, the bathrooms at the pavilion, the city did kick in and help us with that. The city also obviously helped with the parking garage, but we got $1 million grant to put into that parking garage.
Oh, okay.
People don't realize. So the dollar really is symbolic
It
from
was a
the
true partnership.
Yeah, it was really an important partnership because that dollar a year came back to them. It was an investment by the city, and it was my job to make sure that they got a return on that investment. And there is an economic impact, and there are people coming to the downtown, and the restaurants are growing and changing and becoming more an integral part. So all those things made it a destination, made Old School Square, and made the city of Delray Beach. Delray turned into Delray, a place that you wanted to be.
Delray, that's
Yeah.
right. Michael, you said there were 70% of the businesses that had abandoned. So you saw a pretty quick economic impact from the
The
center?
15,000 people he talked about that were there, they felt comfortable. There were enough people that they did feel comfortable to stay after dark. And then pretty soon there was Damiano's, and pretty soon there was 32 East, and pretty soon there was the Bull Bar, and pretty soon there was this and there was that. And that was just with the 15,000.
That's amazing. So it gave people a comfort level of coming here with something other than barbed wire fence and a chain link fence.
And if you want to talk about an investment, the biggest payoff in the world, exceeding anything that you could possibly imagine, is the value of property on the property appraiser's books right now versus what it was in 1990.
Yes.
Now, that has paid for any investment from the city to Old School Square and then returned
and then some.
something to them.
Right.
It's
And
without parallel.
And the business income as well. Hey, Joe, I wanted to ask you, how do cultural centers usually get built? Because Michael was saying this was an unusual thing that happened. There wasn't some blueprint for it.
There
But
isn't.
is it usually the cities that make it happen, or is it the citizens?
It's again a partnership with the citizens that Michael talked about, the people that come together. And there was, back in the 1980s, we did this Decade of Excellence bond and we did this whole charrette where we came together as a community to decide where the community was going to go, a visioning process.
I see.
And in that visioning process was the process of maybe taking those schools, which were scheduled for demolition, by the way.
Yeah, I heard there was going to be a Walmart or something on there.
You never knew,
Who
but
knows?
Francis Bork came to Del Campbell, the mayor at the time, and said, look, let's get a task force going and see what could happen to these buildings. So it could have been anything, quite frankly. But the idea of culture, bringing culture into the community, and I come from the background that culture builds community.
Of course.
And so consequently, you take art and jazz and music, and our art and jazz was, on the Avenue. It was probably one of the most unique things that was being done in Palm Beach County, and everybody else has emulated this, by the way.
Well,
like
I'm
the
noticing
Thursday
a
on
lot of
Clematis.
cities, of course.
A
Yeah,
lot of the
yeah.
things that people are doing around us was instigated and started right at the
Replicating
downtown.
what you guys
Yeah.
created.
Unbelievable.
What a vision and what
He
a
created.
what a community
There was no
getting
playbook.
together. Okay, yeah. You
But
guys are.
so you look at a Kravis Center and you look at a major center in the community. Again, that economic impact. You look at the number of seats and the positioning of where it was. 2,100 seats is feasible because you have traffic in and out. You have to really understand where this particular center was sitting in the middle of downtown to know how you get traffic in, out. And think about it. You can't have an event going on in the museum and going on in the theater and going on the outdoor stage and going on in the gym because there's parking and the people that's got to get to these events. It was the biggest puzzle you've ever seen to
But
try
you
to
made
make
that
this.
happen.
We made it happen.
You made that happen.
Because we understood it. And let me tell you, going forward, that's going to be one of the hardest things. No matter who goes in,
Right.
how to orchestrate all of the things that are going to happen.
To juggle it.
You've got to be a juggler of the first degree.
You mentioned Kravitz. I know that the Kravitz and the Arsht and the Lincoln Center, none of those are city run. Those are
Nonprofits.
nonprofit run.
And you have to understand, what does that mean? That means that the majority of their funding comes from the community,
Right.
from donors,
Right.
and from earned income. Obviously, we learned how to put on shows to make money. So if you look at 80% of our budget, 100% of our budget, 80% of it's brought in by donations, by the actual ticket sales revenue that way.
Okay.
We were getting roughly a 20% from the city. 22%,
Okay.
up to 25. You could
Really
ask for
not a
25,
very
but we
big-
never did.
not a
So
very big
consequently,
part.
you got to remember that that's what's one of the things that's really, I think, in jeopardy is the fact that who's going to fund that 80% that we were actually raising ourselves?
Taxpayers.
It's going to
I
be
mean, that's
inter-
what my fear is anyway. Didn't you sort of were instrumental in some of the awards that not only the center won, but the
Well,
whole city won, right?
I'm proud to be a part of that because
good.
I think it really speaks to the fact that this was citizen driven
Mm-hmm.
and it came from a groundswell of support for people who understood what the arts could do for this community. The International City County Management Association named Old School Square one of the top 3 projects in the United States for using the arts to affect a positive change on the community. We were at the Smithsonian accepting that award.
Wow, that gave me chill bumps.
So it was
And
it was a
and
turning
I'm
point.
part of this
And
organization.
then I'm so
but-
proud to say that in 1993 when we did the first
Uh-huh.
All America City award, Old School Square was one of the projects that won us that award that year.
Okay.
But that's because it was citizen driven. That's what the All America City Awards are about. But we over the years we've won national and state preservation awards for the work that we've done on these buildings, and that's why it's so important to me and to this community. They understand that these buildings, the museum is now past 100 years old. We can't let these falter. They've got to continue to be taken care of because they are so fragile and they are so, vulnerable to a variety of things, just environment. So
Michael
it's
was
got to
mentioning
be
even
important.
The casings or whatever on the outside of the window you can't replace.
Well,
So
not
you
only
must
can you not
maintain them and
replace
care
it,
for
yeah,
them.
you do. But you also, if you want to put in hurricane windows, you have to go to the state and ask that you have to get those approved.
Oh, because
you can't
it's
just put them in because it's on the National Register of Historic Places.
Okay.
Yeah, I
There
think
are
you're-
so many things that have to be done to take care of those buildings. And unfortunately, as we all know, they've been sitting empty now for
Yes.
almost 6 or 7 months, and that
Right.
is just a death sentence. And it's not good.
I think one of the reasons that you are doing this podcast is that what's occurred is there was 2 decades of tremendous success. And then instead of focusing on how it is that it brought us forward, memories were shortened and everyone took a look at, maybe there's too much traffic, or maybe there's too much noise, or maybe the Christmas tree is too crowded. And what happened is all the nitpicking took away from what was the great institution. And if I'm hoping, and I think one of the things that this podcast will do, and one of the things that Joe is able to explain is we will go back to the foundation of what those great original principles are. And we'll live with the remainder of, the site's a little crowded and
Right.
it's a little difficult to do this. That's what I hope everybody takes away from the information that they're getting here today.
And a lot of goodness happened because of it. A lot of goodness can continue to happen. I'm sort of new. I'm a Johnny-come-lately. I wasn't here for the genesis of that. I've never been involved in the board, but I've certainly enjoyed it.
But you know what? There's a feeling.
Yeah.
And you feel it when you're down there.
Right.
And I feel it when I go to a concert or when I'm at the Tree or when I'm at First Night, which is the non-alcoholic New Year's Eve celebration that we
Yes.
started in Delray.
A feeling of community.
the first,
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what it
absolutely.
is.
And belonging.
And
yeah.
it's also a gathering place. You weren't here when 9/11 happened. And let me tell you, it was almost spontaneous. This community came out and we created a candle walkway all the way down the front of the front of the museum. People came out and just stayed and kind of were together to be together because
they
our
needed
hearts
it.
are on our sleeves. And it was just a really important thing. Same thing with the kids, from
Didn't
the
you have a
Parkland kids.
shooter. That's right. I remember that.
You got to remember that Old School Square, while it does a lot of great programming, it's just a place for the community to gather. A place that we can all come together and where all of our voices can be heard.
That's right.
We're all respectful of each other. It's always been that gathering place. And I don't know what's going to happen to Old School Square, but it's got to stay the gathering place that it is for this community because it's what sets us apart, Michael. It's
Yeah.
exactly what you talk
Yeah.
about. It's what makes us special.
Well, I know what the commission did felt like a slap in the face to you and scores of volunteers and donors that helped build the organization over 30 years. It was operating for 30 years, doing great things for Delray, right? For 30 years, 32 years. What do you think that the commission vote did to the city? What have we lost?
Well,
And no crying, no.
No, it's emotional for me because
I know,
I
I bet.
understand. You can put, the city can come in and put show after exhibit after whatever and put those in those buildings.
Mm-hmm.
What they're leaving out and what they're not understanding is the human aspect of it. The people that donated to Old School Square and gave hundreds, we had over 100 volunteers at one time. Can you imagine how those hours add up? Look at the donors who have stepped forward. The Cornell family, George and Harry Cornell,
gosh.
they were one of the first donors to step forward. You don't have that anymore. You don't have people wanting to donate to Old School Square because it's being run by a city entity now. It's not the heart. They've lost the heart.
We already donate by our taxes, right?
You
What?
do.
Yeah.
You pay for it. It's not a donation.
Right. Well, no, I understand.
You know what I'm
I
saying?
understand.
But that's the most critical thing I think we've lost, and I'm hurt the most by these commissioners who have no sense of community or history or caring about what they've done. And it's going to take another 30 years to get these people back. Get people to want to give to the Old School Square Cultural Arts Center, because that's how you make
built it over 30
You build
years.
it over 30
Right.
years based on the fact that you had people caring, and there are people that gave money and donations, and there were people that were my family. They were all family because they cared so much about Old School Square. We've lost our family, and that hurts. That hurts a lot when I say that we've lost our family.
It kind of felt like the city got torn apart too. I know that the efforts have been made to reopen and fix what I think was a mistake. I know there was an invitation to negotiate, ITN, and groups came in to view the property, but nobody actually responded to that. Maybe because of the same mistrust that you were talking about. It's like, wait a minute, that happened to this group after 30 years. What could happen to us? I don't know. And then I know Commissioner Julie Casal was really trying to get the Boca Museum in to operate our city's cultural center, and I don't think that's happening. But I think that the DDA, and I love Laura Simon, I think the DDA is maybe poised to come in there. But the only thing that bothers me is how will they reopen and what costs to taxpayers? Because I'm in the DDA district in 2 properties, so I have to pay for that. Then I have to pay for my city taxes, which goes to the CRA. It's like, how much of my money is going to something like, isn't that fiscally irresponsible?
Clearly, there was no thought process.
Right.
There was clearly no thought process.
I know, at least wait till the
Figure it
museum
out.
is done,
And
or
like
the
I say,
fair is done.
I'm with you, and I bet Michael would say the same thing. I'm not sure who's going to go in there, and maybe the DDA can go in. But for me, you're asking me personally how I feel about it.
Right.
It's a Band-Aid. I think they're capable. They're certainly smart
Band-Aid
people,
on a wound
and they
they
know.
created.
But it's a wound that the city created, and
Exactly.
they weren't prepared to take care of it.
I see.
And it's just gonna fester. It's not gonna get better. And the reason is just what I said to you. You've lost the family and you've lost the community, and you're not going to get that back by handing it over to Parks and Rec.
Right.
I'm sorry, it just
This
isn't
is-
going to happen.
I'm not
so
that connected, but my heart's breaking for you guys, but
there'll be
also for the
activities.
whole
There'll be
community.
activities.
Yeah, it's not about
And
activities.
also,
it's like
and
what
maybe
you said.
somebody could say, well, I don't know, Old School Square as I used to know it. What I can't really fathom is why someone would sit on the dais with their arms folded saying, there's nothing really going on there. There's nothing, I don't see anything happening at Old School Square. Come on.
happening,
I
yeah.
mean, have you been downtown lately? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
To say that type of thing really characterizes, I think, him as a person and their inability to look at what we have accomplished in the past and what we could have accomplished moving
And continue
forward.
to accomplish.
And that hurts.
Well, I think I'm so sorry.
No,
We're
that's
kind
right.
of running out of time. I could sit and talk to you guys all night. In fact, what are you doing after this? Thank you so much, both of
Absolutely.
you, for being our guests.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you very much. I'll have you back again for another hour and a half conversation. Thank you, Joe and Michael.
Thank you so much.
I'm Judy Malika for Friends of Delray. Please let your voices be heard, get engaged, talk with neighbors, and attend city meetings. And watch for our next podcast or video. We believe Delray is at its best when we're stronger together. Thank you for joining Friends of Delray, addressing the relevant issues facing our community. Follow us on Facebook and YouTube, and please sign up for our newsletter at our website, friendsofdelray.us. We believe Delray is at its best when we work together.